Hello and welcome to BSG Webinars, everyone. My name is Dan Carney, Graphic Design Manager at BSG, coming to you once again from my home office in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Just want to thank everyone for joining us. This is our 11th episode now, and we're really starting to get in the thick of them. It's exciting stuff. We also have future episodes that'll be posted on our website, and also links to video recordings of our past episodes on our YouTube channel. That page can be found by going to bsgcraftbrewing.com and clicking on the webinars tile, or going directly to bsgcraft.com/webinars. New episodes usually air every Thursday. Next week we'll have HVG presenting new German hop breeds, and the following week after that, we'll have an in-depth look at how to understand and read malt certificates of analysis. Those links will be up soon, so please check back to register on our website. Throughout this webinar, we ask that you ask questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of the toolbar on your screen. You can also send follow-up questions to webinars@bsgcraft.com. Today's speakers are Richard Simpson, Jamie Ramshaw, and David Carnes of Simpsons Malt. Their talk is entitled Simpsons Malt, an introduction to UK barley varieties and how they are grown. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guests. Welcome, Richard, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello.
And David. Looks like we've got everyone. How are you guys doing?
Yeah,
All right.
very well. How are you?
Pretty good.
Very good.
Cheers, Jamie.
Cheers.
And Richard.
Your health.
Yeah, doing
It is
well.
7 p.m. here, Dan. Remember?
Yeah, well, it's just past noon, 1 o'clock.
That's chin. That's chin, Dan. That's chin.
Mhm.
No.
Tequila.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you guys want to just do a quick brief introduction, I'm sure most of our guests know who you are, but
Yeah, Richard Simpson, Simpsons Malt, 5th generation maltster, vice chairman. I get to hang out with the BSG folks. Well, used to be quite often until recently.
that's true. We miss you.
I missed you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Jamie.
Oh, so I'm the director of UK sales. I look after the brewers and the food producers in the UK. I sell and give technical support. I'm a brewer by trade, but I must admit I haven't made any beer except in my garage for about 6 years.
Thank you. And David, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'm at the sharp end of it. I sort of grow the barley. My brief is I'm the Ag Chem and Technical Director for Simpsons Malt. So I work with our growers, providing the best advice for getting the best out of their crop and providing the quality of product that we all want.
Well, excellent. I thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. We are going to start about a 20-minute video, but then afterwards, Richard and Jamie and David will have some talking points after the video, and then we will jump into the Q&A section, so stick around. And with that, let's get the video started.
Good day, welcome to the spring variety trials here at Barnet Beal in Northumberland. It's part of our trials at Simpsons Malt and McCreef Simpson and Prentice. I'm joined by Paul Huntley, who's our Director of Seed, and David Cairns, who's our Technical Director of Agronomy for MSP. We're just going to take a look through some varieties that we have that are on trial, but also some established varieties so we can compare them against each other. And we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to get to this stage, and a little bit about what's required in growing absolutely amazing malting barley.
So this is a spring malting barley variety trial site where we have field scale plots of distilling varieties, dual purpose brewing and distilling varieties, and purely brewing varieties, where we're looking at established market leading commercial varieties at the moment, alongside new varieties which are coming through the system, and we're able to look at them on a field scale and monitor them agronomically through the season, and also have a look at them post-harvest in our laboratory where they will all undergo micromalt tests, so we can also gauge the quality of the varieties, which is particularly pertinent to the new ones, so we can benchmark them against the current standards. So this is purely a spring barley site. We don't have winter barleys here. In the UK there's two distinct sort of growing seasons for barley. So we have spring barleys, which are typically sown in February, March, and harvested just coming up to this time of the year, August time. We also have winter barleys, which are sown in September and which would come to harvest a little earlier than the spring barley, so they would typically be cut towards the end of July. But this is purely spring varieties that we're actually looking at here. So it's a chance for us to compare the new varieties coming through the system with the standard varieties, both quality-wise and agronomically in the field. So in the UK we have two systems really of evaluation of varieties running alongside each other. One is the AHDB recommended list system, which is basically a system based on agronomic merit, in particular yield, but also other agronomic factors such as straw strength, earliness, disease resistance, etc. And varieties undergo a series of trials throughout a number of sites throughout the country, the whole of the UK. And they're evaluated against each other, and the best of them get selected to go onto this recommended list, which is published every year. So there's new varieties continually coming through from breeders through national list trial systems, national list 1 into national list 2, and ultimately the best of them appear on the recommended list here. And running alongside that, we have a quality-based evaluation system run under the auspices of the MAGB, where varieties are assessed for quality, malting quality. They have to be on the recommended list before they can then be entered into the quality trial system with MAGB. So really a variety has to be agronomically robust before it can in turn be progressed through macro scale trials, which the industry would roll out on the most promising varieties coming through. Initially the varieties enter into micromalt trials, and they're assessed on a fairly small scale, and the best of those would then be selected to be looked at on a more macro scale size trial, which would be run through malting such as ourselves and distilling and brewing partners. And ultimately these results are then fed into the Malting Barley Committee, which meets twice a year. I'm a member of that committee, and we look at the results, both micro scale trials and macro scale trials, and the varieties then become approved or not approved as the case may be, and we end up with a document such as this, which is, as Richard said earlier, the stairway to heaven. So we've got the varieties on the right here, which are those which have reached full approval for either brewing, distilling, or both. G is for grain distilling. Then we've got the varieties which are coming through, which are now entering into macro scale trials with maltsters, brewers and distillers. They just need to undergo a bit more testing before they can reach the full approval. And then we've got feeding into that, we've got provisional year 1, where they haven't yet had the trialling which it takes to get into provisional 2. So you can see how many varieties start over here, and then gradually they thin down through the agronomy on the recommended list. Those which fall shy agronomically are weeded out, and those which fail to meet the quality criteria are weeded out, and gradually as we move from left to right we end up with the fully approved varieties left at the end.
Paul was speaking about weeding out there before, so I'll come in and talk about the agronomics, and that's my bit. We'll get all these varieties that come through the recommended list. Farmers have decided which ones they're going to grow, and my job is then we've got to come in, no matter what the conditions are like, we've got to try and get the best out of these varieties in terms of yield and quality for the maltings. So the UK grows good barley because we've got this maritime climate, which is that sort of balanced climate between, you know, enough moisture and enough sunshine on there. As Paul said, the varieties are chosen on various things, yield being the driving factor for the grower, but also we're looking at disease resistance, maturity, straw strength, everything like that. So we advise the growers, my job is I'm advising the growers right from the word go of how thick he's going to sow the crop, and that depends on the soil type, the conditions, everything like that, time of year that they're sowing. And then to get the best nutrition in there, so we're looking at how much nitrogen we're going to put at it, both for yield but also with the quality bit at the back of our mind all the time. And then we're looking at trying to maximise or minimise any sort of pressure that's all the variables that are going to take away from yield. So we look to control any weeds which are going to reduce yield, we look to control any diseases that are going to reduce yield, and we advise the correct programmes for that. Every year is different, and we try and reduce all them variables all the time, but the big driving factor to how crops perform is Mother Nature. And this year, probably I talked about the maritime climate, we haven't had the best of years on it all. Had a very wet winter, which then led into a dry spring, an extremely dry spring, which meant we were possibly later in getting crops in, and I'm talking about the springs here, we didn't get them off to the best start. And you can see when we look at the field, huge variability, and that's down to some of the seeds germinated straight away, some of them germinated later, and then we did eventually get rain, and we've got a lot of secondary tillers in there. So we're having to manage these crops very carefully to try and optimise harvest time. And we've got the rain in the nick of time, and hopefully yield will be okay. But I usually quote in this field, it's 6 hectares, we normally get 35-40 tonne of barley off it. Put it into the maltings, you'll get a wagon load of malt off this field. We might just be struggling on this year. So Paul's going to run us through a few of the varieties. The first one we're going to talk about is Golden Promise, good old favourite there, but from my perspective, great variety to look after, takes a lot of diseases and everything like that, so we've got to be a lot kinder to it, but given the right conditions and everything like that, it does do the job. I had a grower yesterday who was cutting GP. It was at 1.36 nitrogen, and he was yielding 7 tonne to the hectare. So if we can get that across the board, we'll be very happy.
Of course, Golden Promise is a bit of an anomaly in that it isn't in any of the approved lists anymore. Paul, can you tell us a bit about this heritage variety that is Golden Promise?
Golden Promise, it's about 50-year-old, and because these lists are based on yield and up-to-date agronomy, varieties can fall off them as easily as they can go onto them. They're reviewed every year, and anything that has fallen off the pace comes off the list. So a variety such as Golden Promise, because it's 50-year-old, it hasn't got the yield potential, and typically in a good year we'd maybe expect to bank on about 2 tonne an acre, David, on this variety, as opposed to some of these more modern new varieties which we'll look at in a moment. As you can see spread over the field here, they're probably, we used to use 2.5 tonne as the benchmark, but realistically a lot of these newer ones we're getting up to 3 tonne, David.
People are disappointed if they haven't got three in there, but as the main reasons said before, that might not be achievable this year, but that's what we are aiming for all the time.
A key thing with Golden Promise that the new varieties have not managed to replicate, though, is earliness of maturity, and I think we can just about detect it here over the field. Yeah. Golden Promise is a very short, stiff variety, but it's also very early, and there's no other variety in the field here. None of the other varieties which have been bred since are as early to combine as Golden Promise, and that can be an advantage.
Let's be fair to say, this would cut today, the others are still 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
So you can see with Golden Promise, I mean, why would anyone grow this? Well, few reasons really. I think farmers, a lot of farmers we work with take great pride in growing malting barley. 1, 2, Golden Promise is a heritage one, takes a bit more care, a bit more sort of attention, I suppose, and therefore it feels good to grow that and for it to look so fine. And the other thing is we do pay a premium for it over the other sort of modern varieties. A field is only so big, it doesn't get bigger each year depending on what you're growing it. So as Paul and David have mentioned, we pay per tonne, so we have to put a premium on that. And that really sort of makes up for that extra bit of care and attention. It might cost a bit more as well to produce it. And it really it means it's sort of worth growing for the farmer. for sure.
We do have a very good group of farmers who grow Golden Promise for us. You know, we select growers who know are going to meet the spec, who are going to look after it properly. And like Richard says, they do take a pride in doing it. And, you know, an attraction to them is, as we've mentioned, is the earliness of it. But the main thing for them is I think they do like the pride of growing a barley that's got a destined market for it.
It's very true, but it is more costly to grow, and it has a less yield potential.
Yep.
So unless there's an incentive for the farmer to grow it, i.e. he's paid a higher price, then unfortunately an old variety like this just wouldn't get grown.
Yeah. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, that's what they evaluate on, the need to have that premium, because it is a riskier crop to grow than what some of the other varieties are, because the spec has got to be the right. So,
And
risk reward.
Yeah, and I think as a malt, certainly the brewers who use it and keep coming back and using it, they feel that's more than warranted, paying that a little extra. It does something a little different to modern varieties in terms of its interaction with other ingredients in beer. It's just a bit different. Yeah, love GP.
Okay, just as an example of a standard in the market at the moment, and one of the leading commercial varieties just now, this is the variety RGT Planet. It's a GN producer, so it's a brewing only variety, no interest to the distilling industry. It's a very high yielding variety, was for a number of years the highest on the list, although it isn't now, because it's a few years old and a few others have come along and usurped it. But very widely grown. It was 41% of the English seed certifications this year, less in Scotland because it isn't suitable for the distilling industry. It's more likely to be grown as a feeding barley in Scotland. It was about 8%. But about 35% of the spring barley purchased last ex-harvest 19 in England was RGT Planet. So a widely established variety. It went through all the systems several years ago, got onto the recommended list, had the number of trials done with the brewers, got full approval, now completely established in the market and taken a large market share. So this is an example of a variety that has succeeded in the market. We'll now have a look at a few that are hoping to succeed coming forward. Okay, so here's another very successful commercial variety at the moment at the top of its game. This is Laureate. Unlike Planet, this is a brewing and distilling variety. I meant to add in before that in order to get the approval for a variety, it has to undergo 2 successful malting and brewing trials to be successful, to get fully approved for brewing, or 2 successful malting and distilling trials to be successful for distilling. So it's quite a hard task for these varieties to actually reach full approval. It's not a given. The Laureate has got full approval. It's a fully recommended variety on the list here with a yield of 104. At the moment it's commanding a massive market share. 50% of the seeds sold in Scotland this spring was Laureate, 24% in England, and the barley purchases is even more impressive. 62% of last harvest was Laureate in Scotland and 38% in England. So you can see 35% Planet that we talked about before, 38% Laureate. A huge amount of the English barley purchases are coming from just 2 varieties. So a very successful variety that's gone right through the whole trialling system and is now in the marketplace, reaping its rewards for the breeder.
Very, very, very popular with farmers. I mean, this was the variety that really took over from Concerto and set the new yield bar, and noticeably in field difference. We were talking about before about the yield of Golden Promise compared to that. That's a Golden Promise ear. Look at the size of that. That's a laureate ear. You can see where the yield comes from. So why people want to grow varieties like this.
Very much so, David. It's interesting that already, though, we've got Laureate that broke down the barriers. Concerto at 97% yield, and in fact 93% yield, I think. And this one at 104, and already we're now looking at varieties that are on the list at 107. So they don't stay at the top for very long.
No. Let's
have a look at one of the 107s now. So these are 2 varieties which are currently right at the top of this recommended list at the moment on yield. We've got LG Diablo, which is at 107% of control, and we've got SY Tungsten. Both of these were potentially dual-purpose varieties. Diablo is already a fully approved distilling variety. It's still undergoing further trialling for brewing, which it hasn't actually got full approval for yet. That will be decided by the end of the year. And Tungsten is the variety coming along a year behind Diablo. This just got full approval onto the recommended list last December. So a new variety on the list that's just going to undergo macro-scale trialling for this harvest. And indeed, Simpsons, we are actually doing one of the trials on this variety. In this case, it's a distilling trial, but equally, it is a potential brewing variety too. So this one looks quite promising, actually. Just a name to take away from today. SY Tungsten, Syngenta variety, same as Laureate, has looked quite impressive all season, David, I would say, with the ear size and the grain size on it. I think it's perhaps not quite as early as some of the other varieties, but certainly I think when you look at the ears alongside some of the other varieties, it's certainly
I've got one of the commercial crops that we're growing for it, and the grower, in relation to his other varieties, he has noticed that the tungsten, in his opinion, looks better, and I think he's right. It seems to have a lot more vigour about it. It's produced a lot more shoots. So we'll see. It does look thick.
Potential. When we look at it compared to other varieties, it's certainly not the earliest in the field, but it does seem to have some potential. So this will be the first year of proper evaluation of tungsten in the market. There's not a lot of it about at the moment. We have put enough seed in to up the ante on this one next year if we like what they see in trials this year. Okay, so we've had a look at some commercially successful varieties. We've had a look at some varieties which are looking as if they're progressing through the system. Now go right back in time. Here's a couple of new ones which are just coming through, and I was saying before how difficult it can be to progress all the way through the system successfully, because they have to be there agronomically to be on the list, and they have to be there quality wise to get malting barley approval. So here's two brewing only varieties coming through. They're both GN producers, so no interest to the distilling market. One is called Skyway and one is called Cadiz. And when we put these trials in back in March, we hadn't had the malting barley committee meeting in May. We didn't know which ones were going to progress from the micro malt results. So such as a thin line between success and failure. Skyway appears to have had hot water extract equal or above to the control, and it's going to progress further in the system. And we may well have this in the plots again next year. Cadiz, unfortunately, has fallen short on the quality and it doesn't look as if it's going to progress any further, so we quite probably won't see this one again. So for the breeder who's just put 10 years worth of his life into breeding this variety, a fleeting appearance in the field, and it doesn't look as if it's going to make it. So Cadiz what it is. Sorry.
Very good. Very good.
So there we have it. Thank you very much for joining us on our premiere of our first ever digital crop trials. We usually have people coming here every year, farmers, distillers, brewers. It's very popular. You can really see the differences between varieties, particularly the modern varieties against the Golden Promise. It really does help show that point that we were making earlier. It's a beautiful setting. I've got Bamborough Castle and Lindisfarne behind me. It's a wonderful place to come. You can have a look at the varieties. So in future years, please do come. We do these every year, and we can get some fish and chips and a nice pint of cask beer at the barn at Beal here. So thank you once again. I hope you found it informative as well. Paul and David are really our leaders in their field. We do have a division that's absolutely dedicated to agriculture. So everything from the seed to agronomy advice, and also buying barley and other combinable crops. So we really have our boots on the ground when it comes to farming. So yeah, any questions, feel free to email us or ask us anytime, and hope to see you here in future where we can do this face to face. But take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Excellent.
Oh,
great video. Look at you. Are you at CBC?
I am. I'm at Juno's bar. So yeah, there we have it. At our trials on a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. I think it was. When that area is like that, it's just feels twice as beautiful as it normally is. So.
It's fair to say some of our filming earlier hasn't been like that, but that was the best afternoon we had.
Well, the first time we tried, there was 30-mile-an-hour gusts, so a little bit more wind than we'd hope. So, yeah, have we got any questions, Dan?
Well, I would say the audio was very good and the video was excellent. So a nod to Martin on his job done. Well done.
Well done, Martin.
that. So we do have some questions coming in. I've got one that is, could we have an explanation of GN?
Oh, Jamie, come on. You're a master brewer.
No,
So GN?
no, that's distilling. That's
Yeah,
distilling.
GN.
That's distilling. No, that's that. You answer that. It's distilling.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to answer that one. In that terrible answer.
I can take it either if you
Go on,
want.
then.
Yeah, well, well, David will correct me. So GN is short for and easier to say than glycosidic nitrile, which I'm glad I'm only one beer in because that gets tougher to say. But glycosidic nitrile. So varieties in Scotland are predominantly grown for distilling because there's a distilling industry there. And distillers have the the big sway in Scotland, and a lot of varieties are grown in Scotland that are what they call nil GN, and it basically means that genetically they will not produce the sort of GN compound, which can occur under certain circumstances in distilling, which so that it's a carcinogen. So distillers are very risk adverse, and so when they found out that you could get varieties without this GN, they just said, we're just taking GN. So when it comes to a barley being approved for distilling, it has to be nil GN. Otherwise, it's not going to get there at all. At all.
Yeah.
But these compounds do not, these compounds don't form in brewing. It's in the distillation process. So
it's the concentration, and that's what causes it. So, like I say, it used to be that there was a benchmark, a level that anything getting on the recommended list had to be below that level, and then they just put a zero tolerance on it. So we are at that stage now where anything to be recommended for distilling must be a non-GN producer.
So they have no risk of that happening in whiskey now because it just won't happen. It's the best way of doing it, I guess.
Excellent. So next question. It seems like in hop breeding, there's more and more emphasis on new and experimental versus older or landrace varieties. What do you think is the future of heritage barleys like Golden Promise?
Go on, Jamie.
Oh, okay. So again, we're going to go back to the farm. It really is about the farming. As long as brewers want heritage varieties, they can be grown, but you've got to get the farmer to grow them, and the farmer will grow them if they can compete in price with a new variety. And really, it's down to that. So the brewer has to pay for a heritage variety. Really, that's the kind of way it goes. So as long as the brewer wants them, we can hang on to these varieties.
Sure.
But you're gonna pay more for them. That's the thing.
I mean, the famous ones, I guess, from the UK side are Marisota, Golden Promise, and there's another one I forget the name of that one of our stable mates produces, Chevalier, of course. And I think it's well, it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort and probably a lot of costs to try and resurrect some of these old varieties. We do get contacted by farmers that have maybe grown beer barley. Is that the right? Yeah, that's how you say it, isn't it, David? It's very ancient variety of barley. And Plumage Archer is one that we've been offered and tried with before. And it's quite interesting. We always think you could do quite an interesting malt, just a small malt, one-off maybe. I'm kind of always reminded by what my dad says though, and quite often he goes that he sort of goes, well, they kind of disappeared for a reason. If they're about still and people are buying them, then that's good reason enough. But they kind of went for a reason, which is the newer varieties were just giving people something more or something more consistent.
Sure.
There's something in the heritage barleys, isn't there, that's bringing the character to what people are looking to do, and the story as well behind them. So, you know, we've got Golden Promise, it's 50-odd-year-old there now, and it's still got a big demand. I mean, there's very popular, well-known beers which are made with it. So, you know, there's something in it that we're hanging on to.
Yeah, I was going to say, Richard, is that these heritage varieties cling on because brewers want them, but all development of new varieties is for the farmer. That kind of, I think that might be changing.
It's the first hurdle. Yeah. You know, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean,
as Paul said there, a lot of the recommended lists, it's got to tick the agronomic boxes, and that's why they come onto this here. But you know, I think as was mentioned previously, there the heritage barleys will still hold on, but there's got to be a premium in it, and it's like I said in the video there, it's risk reward. You know, if the premium's right, somebody will take that risk.
Right, and then with today's beer styles and all the experimentation that brewers are doing, you know, that's a lot of risk for a farmer and a malt supplier like you take, just for them to try and create the new wow beer, and for it to, you know, maybe work out or maybe not. That's you know, that's why. Yeah, it's a lot.
I think they do offer. I think they do offer an alternative to modern varieties, and you know, I'm not. You know, I think you know, you will get a variety that comes along, whether it's heritage as Golden Promise or Marisota. Something will come along one day that actually will be very different. I think as priorities might change, you know, there's a big sustainability agenda. Will that change things? Will yield be will yield have a cost because of certain sustainability agendas? I don't know. You know, and also priorities always change. I mean, from, you know, decade to decade, so generation to generation. So it may well be that, you know, a variety is you know, grown that does offer something distinctly different to modern varieties, and you know, that's what's exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
The one thing that changes in my career within agriculture as well, I think, is that farmers now are more in touch with the want to grow for given markets. You know, they're not growing commodities; they want to know where they're going, so they're interested in providing for a market as much as the market's interested in understanding the provenance of the product.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, excellent. On that same note, do you grow other heritage varieties for malting?
Well, we certainly buy them. I mean, yeah, I mean, those trials, that's one field, and we do manage a farm where we can try out sort of various, whether it be new varieties or new agronomical techniques, but so we don't necessarily grow it ourselves, but yeah, I mean, the one thing we do buy, you know, usually buy a reasonable amount of is Marisota, is the other one, which is similar, 50 years old, different again because that's a winter variety, and as Paul explained, the winter spring thing. That's another variety we take regularly, year in, year out. We've been offered every so often some Plumage Archer or beer barley, but it tends to be our field. So quite often when we bring it in, we just think it's too poor to malt, so we don't. But if something sort of was interesting, we might do something interesting with it, like maybe a traditional malt, just to accentuate the traditional, I suppose. And it's probably how they malted it then is probably the way you'd want to malt it now. I mean, because you couldn't expect the same sort of extracts or performance probably in a brew house. So you probably want to do something a bit different with it.
Sure. Yeah, because we also had a question, do you use winter barley for malting? So I think you answered that, though.
Yeah, we do. Jamie, go on, you answer that one. We use a bit more winter barley.
So Marisota is the only winter we actually malt. Are they frozen? We only use winter. The only winter we use is Maris Otter for malting base malts. We use winters for making roast house malts. So a few varieties that I won't mention because I'm not allowed to. But yeah, and they come from East Anglia, and some of those come from Scotland. But Tivitshaw's has a finite size, so we make certain base malts down there. We make GP and we make Maris Otter basically.
I think winters are often a challenge. Typically in a brew house, am I right in thinking their extracts maybe aren't quite up to what a spring is?
I think extracts.
David can wax lyrical about the challenges of. Also there is no nil GN winter barley, as far as I know. So distillers aren't really looking to it. But David can tell you the challenges of growing winter barley against, on farm. It's always a competition to get them to grow malting barley, because a farmer can grow a range of things. So there's an element of competition in that. I don't know, David. Winter barleys, the challenges they have against spring.
Yeah, I mean, winter barley is notoriously in a farm's rotation is the poorest margin crop that they've got there. And at the end of the day, the farmer is driven on margin. What's in it for them? Rotationally, it's a very good crop, but there is other alternatives out there. And unfortunately, in the winter malting barley pool, there isn't a vast genetic pool there. So there's not a lot of new varieties. Paul mentioned all the varieties that are coming through. We see that a lot in spring. We see that in winter wheat, but in winter malting barley, unfortunately, we don't see that that lift. So we'll talk about control. We've got varieties that are producing 104, 105% of control. A lot of the winter malting barleys are probably down to that 85, 90% of control. So we have got a yield penalty there with them. So the premium for a lot of growers isn't deemed as being sufficient for there. So we've got hybrid barleys out now, which are yielding 10 tons of a hectare and stuff like that. So, farmers are very reticent to grow winter barley. And I think unfortunately, we haven't got that breeding pool coming through. But rotationally, in our part of the world, it's still a very important crop because we need it to get entry for break crops, etc., etc. But it's in other parts of the UK, where the market's right, they'll grow it. And Maris Otter is a classic example, parts of the UK where there's a good premium for it. Possibly in some years, I think, again, I'm not a marketeer here, it's been overdone, possibly. But, it's now at the stage where, people want to grow for a market, and you've got to have that for winter barley. But we haven't got that gene pool, unfortunately.
Sure. So shifting gears a little bit, we had a question from David Seymour. Simpsons DRC is perhaps the tastiest specialty malt I've ever tasted and appears in several of my most popular recipes. Can you talk a little bit about your crystal and roasted malts? Which barley varieties do they start out with?
Thank you, Mr. Seymour.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Well,
it's one of Jamie's favourite too.
I do like the RC. I think it's lovely. It's got dark colours and it's got roasty colours, but it's also got very low crystal colours, so you get some fruit in there. I think you can get cherry in the beer using that. We can't tell you which varieties we use because that's a secret. Well, unfortunately, but it's also I think we did a blog on it recently about how we make our crystal. We use very good quality barley. I think that's the best thing. I think traditionally roast houses in the UK, especially Tivitshall, when we first went in there was a set of barley that would come in and would go one end of the plant. Another batch of barley would go to the other end of the plant. And we've realised you can't make good crystal by doing that, really. I think. Would you agree, Richard?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't, it's probably not too hard to find out what winter varieties we are. We try not to just blurt it out. I guess we're shy about that. But yeah, the winter varieties, we find they just perform so well in the roast house. They're the complete package. They're a bit they're a bit rougher skinned, a bit rough around the edges. So we find that helps in the roasting process. You're less likely to get leaching, which is when the sort of the wonderful chemistry that's going on inside, when it softens, when it turns into sugar, when it turns into liquid, it doesn't find a way out of the grain because the skin is a little bit tougher. And you know, we're so lucky in the UK. Barley is tends to be low protein, modified like a dream. So yeah, so it's not too hard. And an extract isn't once it's gone through the roasting process or the crystal process, and with the additions you're talking about in a bit, extract isn't kind of the primary concern. That's not what you're looking for. It tends to be flavour and colour. So yeah.
Yeah. Going
but
on.
Jamie, you're right. We have just done a blog. You have just done a blog about it, which is on our website.
Okay. No, what I would say is what we do know, and this is work that Pete Simpson did, is that different varieties very much give you different crystal. And it's really important. And you can make different flavours, especially in the darker crystals. You can notice the difference. So if you try the Maris, when we do some crystal Maris, it has a different flavour. It has less of the fruit flavour. It's more just sweet, actually, isn't it? It's a sort of sweet medium crystal. If you use poorly modified, you tend to get licorice in the same colour range. Whereas if you use the right, well-modified barley in a medium, you don't get burnt flavours. You get fruit, you know. So it's kind of the process. The variety is very important, but also the quality of the variety you buy, and then on top of that, how well you do it. You don't rush the process.
Sure. That actually works well with the next question, because it says, do the heritage barleys behave differently in the malt house than the higher yield modern varieties? Has the malting process or facility had to change?
They probably need a little bit more encouragement. I mean, I guess 50 years ago, 50 years ago, we were 10 years probably into using salad in boxes, having moved from floor maltings. And certainly floor maltings in those days, and the way I guess the world was then, you germinated until it was ready. And, you know, it all altogether seemed a bit more relaxed. Although I hope my father's not watching this. But, you know, it's still hard work, Dad. But, you know, it's, and I guess as we went to more sort of mechanized, for want of a better word, salad in boxes, GKVs, you know, you're tending to try to maximize your plant, your kit that you have. So, you know, typically now we will malt for 4 to 5 days. Germination, sorry, we'll germinate for 4 to 5 days after a day's steeping, and there's a day kilning at the end. Heritage varieties are, if you look at our schedules, they'll be the ones that are 5 days. Sometimes you can do some of them in 4 days.
To catch up, in effect.
Yeah, we tend to do it 5. Otherwise, you end up really pushing them hard, and it makes the kilning process a bit hard, I guess, a bit tricky. So yeah, they need a bit more encouragement and a bit more time, which is fine. They're 50 years old.
A lot of varieties recently have been bred as well, because obviously one of the maltster's key things is dormancy, and a lot of the varieties recently have been they're much thinner skinned. The older varieties are much thicker skinned, so you obviously need that water absorption in there as well. So it's genetics as well, because the maltster has always demanded of the breeder, we need to get dormancy broken quicker.
That is an excellent point, David.
I usually don't give any bad ones.
He's good, isn't he? Couldn't come again.
He's good.
He is.
Good, whoever hired him could have a badge.
Well, then, if you're that good, can you explain more about rotation on the farm? So does the farmer grow one breed, say Golden Promise, for a set number of years, and then need to change breed or crop? And then how does this rotation impact on the volume of certain breeds each harvest? How many years planning is required to manage this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that. Should I? I mean, most farmers are in a rotation because you've got to have a rotation in your farm because you can't grow. And most farms rotations in our area are built around wheat. And first wheat is the banker crop in there, and they're all built towards the first wheat. But without a rotation, you can't have a first wheat. So you've got to have a break crop in there, and you've got to have so most people work on a 5-year rotation, and that may be something like first wheat, and then they'll grow 2 spring barleys, a winter barley to get an entry for oilseed rape, and then oilseed rape, and then back to first wheat because oilseed rape is the break crop in there. You can grow barley, spring barley, you can grow it a little bit more continuously because it's not in the ground for as long, so it's not taking as much nutrition out of the ground, it's not getting the disease carryover. So if you are growing continuous wheat, you get a lot of disease carryover, etc., etc. So it's a rotation is critical to a farmer. But with a commodity like spring barley, you can actually grow it a little bit tighter rotation, you can grow it continuously, but most farms wouldn't do that because they need that rotation for soil health, for crop health, for everything like that, and to have a balanced workload.
Sure.
Yeah, and maybe sort of a sort of flippant way of putting it, for a farmer to continually grow Maris Alta, there's a certain amount of confidence in the ground he's growing it on, you know, and there's a certain amount of bravery and loyalty to that particular variety as well.
But he wouldn't have they wouldn't have the whole farm in there. They would have the rotation within the farm. And when I talk about rotation, it's within the farm that you might have 5 fields, and you'll rotate the crops around them fields, which is it's good. It's good farming practice.
Well, excellent. Another question we have: can you influence nitrogen content when malting, or is that totally dependent upon the farmer?
So typically the nitrogen you get in, so typically the barley to malt, you drop 0.1. Would that be fair to say, Jamie? You drop 0.1?
Well, they work
165
on
nitrogen.
0.07 roughly. So if you start with a 165, you should get a 158.
Yeah. It's definitely, you know, the amount of nitrogen is created while it's growing. I mean, barley is it's a natural product, and it's dependent on the environment. That's where people like me come in. You know, I talked about rotation before. So if you put barley in after oilseed rape, which is left a lot of nutrition there, you're going to get high nitrogen. So my job is I'm coming in there, working where the crop is in the rotation, working what the soil type is, and then we plan the nitrogen amount and timing to try and meet the end market. So we're working with the growers consistently on that. Depends so many variables in there, but time of drilling, everything like that, and we work on how much nitrogen they're going to be put on. But at the end of the day, Mother Nature decides it when we get the rainfall, all that sort of stuff. But we are trying to plan for optimum nitrogen at the end product.
Excellent. So I have a couple more questions. I have one. We moved over from Dutch barley over to Simpsons. Easier lautering, better yield, more body. What's the difference between UK barley and European barley? And he also wanted to note that they use a UK brewing system.
Again, there is another little blog that Martin, our chap, has put out there that we wrote about UK barley, and really it's about where we sit within the jet stream.
Sure.
We have a lot of wet, and then we have a very short dry summer. We have long days. I mean, the agronomics of it, David could talk about that. But what we get is very big plump grains that have lower nitrogen. We only use 2-row barleys as well. And when we germinate, because we've got a low nitrogen, it means we can just use isothermal mashing, 65 degrees C, 1 hour, 80% fermentable. It's really, rule of thumb, it's that simple. It's a very simple way of brewing.
Sure.
It's our day length as well. I mean, the further north you go, the lower nitrogens we usually get because it's the day length, you know, and in Scotland, we usually get lower nitrogen barleys because we've got that longer day length and longer growing season.
And the daylight's where the sugar goes in, basically.
And I know we've mentioned maritime a lot. I mean, broadly speaking, that means we don't really get really cold winters. Certainly, like you experience where you are, Dan. Minnesota, we don't really get those, but we don't really get the massive heat either. I mean, the very thought when we made news here in the UK when they recorded, what was it, 100 in your money, it's 130 odd degrees in Death Valley. That blows our mind. Up here in Berwick, if it gets above 25, I start worrying about the pavement splitting in half. I mean, people lose their minds. We're really kind of mild. Generally, we're very kind of mild. So it's but you do get some really nice long days, and you get some good rainfall. But it's never going to get really cold. It's never going to get really hot. It's simple.
Sounds delightful, actually.
Doesn't it? Sometimes.
We either get like super humid and hot, or just blistering cold, where your face
it's good
freezes
drinking
off.
weather.
All weather is good drinking weather. I think.
Cheers.
I've been in shorts since February, I think.
I have been since March, so.
I'm going to say lockdown shorts, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
Just a couple more. So could you speak a bit to malting process differences between the Golden Promise for brewing and the pot still version for distilling?
Yes, a little bit, but if you want a fuller answer, we can certainly get that to you. I suppose the biggest difference is in the kilning. So with distilling, you're looking to protect two things. You're looking to protect extract, and you're looking to protect some enzymic activity or diastatic power. We call it DP. I've forgotten the American, is it Lintner? I think is the scale. So that means we kiln it. We tend to kiln it at lower temperatures. So instead of, say, an ale malt, to use a sort of slightly extreme alternative, you are looking to dry it out, and then you're looking to put some heat into it, because you get color formation and you get some flavor formation. With distilling, they're not looking for flavor or color, because it's going to go through distilling. So they're looking for spirit yield. So they're looking for as many liters of alcohol per ton. So that comes through in extract, and the DP bit really helps in processability.
It's fair to say there's not really Golden Promise used for distilling. Well, it's not used for distilling really as much now.
Not anymore, no. We get the odd request.
Obviously, GN.
The odd distiller. Yeah, the odd distiller are looking to do something harking back to a day, or they're looking to do this a one-off, and it will require some extra effort for them, because they will have to measure it and make sure they're not creating the sort of GN, the precursors for GN. But yeah, I think, to be honest, it's about protecting the extract. So it's about it being modified, but not overly modified. Because if it starts to become over modified, it's starting to eat into all those lovely carbohydrates and sugars that actually they can turn into alcohol. So that's probably the main difference, simply speaking.
No, that's perfect. Sweet and simple, just like you said.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's me.
Sweet and simple.
All right.
Definitely.
I have two more questions. Does barley variety affect malt flavor?
I think it
Go on,
does.
Jeff.
Definitely in the roast malts, as I said earlier, different crystals will taste very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
You have these melanoidin reactions that happen in the roast house, and those chemical pathways that happen will be specific to that grain variety, because that's the barley, that's the enzymes and the sugars they've got, and they do create the same flavour. If you create the same conditions, create the same flavours. Brewing wise, I think the bigger the brewery you go in, and I've worked in a big brewery in the past as well as small, I think it doesn't matter so much. If you're going into a big brewery, because you can I think a lot of flavors are processed out, to be honest, in big breweries. But I think Golden Promise, I have to say that anyway, it does give you a different flavor. I mean, if you drink Tim Taylor's, you can taste it in a Tim Taylor's. It's bready. It's I don't know, it's a lovely flavor. You can even taste it when you taste them. And even in big hoppy beers, you can taste it. Marisotta, definitely, I think in cask beer, it will come through as a more malty malt than using a spring or a modern winter. But we used Marisotta in big scale as well, very big scale. It doesn't come across as much. I think there's a point where you lose it. I'm talking multiple tons of malt in the mash tun.
Mm-hmm.
Not yeah. I think that happens across the board. But you can taste Marisotta. I've not drunk Chevalier, so I wouldn't know. Plymouth Archer, I've not drunk that either. But yeah, that's all.
You're not that old.
Yeah, I'm not that old. I may look it. I'm only 20.
Tough paper, man.
COVID's been rough on you.
Misspent youth. Very good at ball and darts.
Well, I have one last question, and this is purely for you, Richard. Motorhead or Judas Priest?
Motorhead.
All right.
First gig I went to.
There you go.
First gig I went to.
That's the question everybody's been waiting for.
Exactly. Well, there you go.
I think I know where that came from. How's it going, Dawson?
Yeah, nailed it. Well, guys, I really appreciate you spending the time coming on here today. It's always fun. Love seeing your faces. So Richard, Jamie, David, thanks for sharing your expertise and knowledge with everyone today. And if we didn't get to any questions or you have follow-up questions, please send them to webinars@bsgcraft.com, and we'll work with the Simpsons to get you some answers. And that's even if you're watching this on YouTube after we've aired this. So, and remember, you can register for future webinars on our website at bsgcraft.com/webinars, or just going right to bsgcraftbrewing.com. And there's a link right on our homepage. So from everyone at BSG and Simpsons Malt, thanks for tuning in. I'm Dan Carney with Richard, Jamie, and David. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back. So,
Always a pleasure, never a chore, Dan.
Always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Now it's time for the nut roll. So,
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks again, guys.
How we grow nut roll, didn't we? In the Northumberland terroir for nut roll, we didn't go into that.
We didn't. That's
I think
for
they've grown here. I think they've grown here.
Yeah.
So, well, appreciate it, guys, and we will see you soon.
Cheerio.
See you soon, Dan.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thanks very much.